back to Redemption with Jaden. We're back with more Lackey Grand Prix gameplay. Really, it feels weird calling it the Lackey Grand Prix still when I think most people use the Redemption CCG app, but Redemption CCG app Grand Prix just sounds a little much. This is the Type 2 Lackey Grand Prix number 2, and we are in round 2, so lots of 2s this week. I'm going to be playing against Mr. Joe Roberts, and unfortunately, when we played our game originally, we had a few technical difficulties at first, and throughout that process, I realized that I did not hit record, and that was about 40 minutes into the game. And so the game that you're going to be watching is kind of a repeat game of sorts, or like we ran it back. We still use the score from the original game for the purposes of the Lackey Grand Prix, but we used roughly the same decks. This is the same deck that I used. I think Joe was still working on his deck in between then and this game, and so he made a couple of tweaks, but the baseline of basis of the deck was still the same. And if you watched last week's video, you might recognize this deck somewhat vaguely, at least, because last week I had the Type 1 version of the Honeybound deck, as you can see. If you missed that, you can check out last week's video and get the Type 1 version, but if you're interested in Type 2, or if you just watch that one and want more Redemption content, then that's going to be what we got for this week. It's kind of the same deck, but a little bit bigger, which means we get a little more flexibility as far as what cards we can run and the things that we can do to make it consistent to still be able to set up the combo, or, well, not really combo, but lockdown pieces as early as we can. So we've got 2 copies of Holy of Holies, 1 copy of Pot of Mana in the main deck, and then 1 in reserve. And then we also have 1 copy of Bound to the Law in both the main deck and the reserve. I thought about putting in 3 copies of Bound to the Law with 2 in the main deck, but ended up having to cut it down. As you can see, we ended up at 106 cards, which is a little less than ideal, but you do get that 15th dominant, which is not the worst. So I don't think it makes too much of a difference in the grand scheme of things, and just because we're testing things out for the sake of this Lackey Grand Prix, then I decided to stick with it and try out the extra dominant. I don't know what exactly extra dominant would be in this case. Maybe Israel's Rebellion, but I do kind of like the consistency that it adds of getting Bound to the Law when you want to. But maybe it could be Ride On Victoriously or Redemption as well. So yeah, the defense, we got to add a few things, namely the Syrian package. I guess added a Syrian Marauders, Syrian Mercenaries, and a Naaman, and that allows us to play 2 copies of Damascus and then be able to utilize the Holds ability on it, the fact that it can hold a Grey Curse, so that way we can have False Prophets or Damascus as options for Bound to the Law. But you do have to have you have to have an evil Syrian in play for Damascus to be able to do that. So the Type 1 version didn't quite have space for that. The Type 2 version now does. So I was glad to be able to include that as another consistency piece. As you can see, we're using 6 sites here, and all of them, I guess not counting Bethlehem, but 6 sites, and all of them get more characters. So it's kind of an interesting Type 2 build. It's not super often that you are running 36 neutral cards, and then I've got 35 and 35 for good and evil. Oftentimes I'll be at 37, 26 for a 100 card deck, but this one is fairly even with good, neutral, and evil, which is, it kind of works out though, because the sites kind of work for good and evil, respectively for some of them. So they're kind of they're good cards, and they kind of, as long as your opponent isn't negating neutrals, which is still fairly common, but you don't see it quite as much, then they're going to add a good bit of consistency, a little bit of speed, because they replace themselves right away when you put them down. And interestingly, in the first game that I played with Joe, the one that was not recorded, I was actually able to site lock him for a couple turns, or stall by putting Lost Souls in sights, which is not something that you see super often these days, but it is certainly possible if you have a few sites and then just happen to not get that many Lost Souls out, especially in a deck like this where I'm running 2 copies of Subdued and it's easy to reset lost souls, shuffle them back in. Also, Israel's Rebellion can do the same thing. So we've got lots of ways to hide the lost souls, and then also lots of ways to get these sites out. Or, well, maybe not lots, but we have Covenant with David that can help get the sites out and get both our offense and defense rolling. Really makes Covenant with David a nice flexible card here. So that's main things that are going to be different on the defense. We kind of get to flesh out the consistent, or the maybe the more powerful parts a little bit more. So we get another Emperor for Denarius. We can put a copy of Emperor Nero in reserve, a copy of Entrapping Pharisees in the main deck. I had one in reserve for the Type 1 version, but now I can have one in each, the main deck and reserve. I like to put duplicates of unique characters in the reserve, because then you're not as likely to get hand clogged, and then you can use the Deceiver to get them out if you need to, or I guess when you need to. And that is, I think everything that's really worth pointing out for the defense here. A couple copies of False Peace, and then just doubled up on some of the stronger enhancements that we had in the Type 1 version. Double up on Philosophy, things like that. The offense, we got to flesh out a little bit by having a few more of the Ruth cards. We tripled up on Elimelech, who's the main resource engine of the offense, which in the Type 1 version, your goal is to really get Elimelech as early as possible to use him to generate a little bit of speed before you get Holy of Holies and everything set up, because he doesn't work with Holy of Holies. In the Type 2 version, you kind of want to do the same thing, and so using more copies of Elimelech will help you to get him early, but then the other copies will be useful later on, because we get to run Bethlehem because we have the extra space in Type 2, and the site side of this says that your Ruth heroes cannot be prevented, and so Elimelech will still work through Holy of Holies there and be able to generate some resources, which is nice. The downside is that later on in the game, you don't always want to be attacking with your Ruth heroes. Daniel is going to be probably your best attacking option most of the time, but occasionally David will be good, especially if you can reset him with like a Famine in the Land or 20 shekels, which I could also fit in this version. But otherwise, it'll kind of depend on if you need resources from the deck. You might need to attack with Moses. If you want CBN enhancements, you got Mordecai and Ruth for those options, and then also Chosen Warriors can get your stuff from reserve, and we do have the Egypt Pharaoh's Daughter package in the Type 2 version here as well, because of the extra space again. So really, you're making the deck bigger, but as long as you're going from the Type 1 version to the Type 2, but as long as what you're adding kind of proportionally scales the consistency cards, the fact that we get to add so many of these consistency cards that would maybe be nice in Type 1, but you can't always fit, then it still makes the deck relatively consistent in getting the stuff set up that you want to early on, and then also you're more resilient when they deal with it, because you have other copies that you can get to. So that is the gist of the deck here. I don't think there's really anything else worth pointing out. So I'm gonna we're gonna go into the game with Joe in just a minute here. We did play the game, but I did not record I did record the audio, but we're not going to be listening to that. I might listen to it a little bit, but you guys are just going to hear my commentary because we were not really set up for like a full recording when we were able to schedule the kind of rematch game. So the original game, I did end up winning 6-2, although it was a pretty good game, especially early on when Joe had an early Benaiah. He started putting some pressure on, and I was able to squeak out a couple of blocks there to hold him off before I was able to start stabilizing. And as I mentioned, I had a little bit of the sight lock stuff. So I think, if he had a way around my sights early on, then it might have been a little bit of a closer game there. But it was still a good competitive game. Some interesting decisions that each of us had to make, and I think this one will be the same way, but we'll see maybe a few differences in the way that the game's played out, which is another fun part about Type 2, is that because there's more cards in your deck, you can see a completely different side of your deck from game to game. I think most of the time you want your deck to generally be doing the same thing, and with more copies of cards, you can usually do that, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. But with Type 2, the games are so wavy. They ebb and flow. The momentum can go back and forth more often than in Type 1. So that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy playing Type 2, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the game here. Before we get into it, of course, a shout out to our sponsors over at Your Turn Games. I mentioned last week, but they still have the mystery packs available. Not sure how many of those have sold or how many are still available, but there were 50 total in this batch. So if you are interested in picking up some mystery packs, getting some of those sweet promos or those foil ultra rares, or at least having a chance at the national promos or the foil ultra rares that he's included in there, then you can go ahead and pick these up. It's $50 for one, but you get a discount if you buy 3 or 5, and you can of course buy more than that if you increase the amount of each batch that you want. So go ahead and check those out. You can see the full list of everything that is included there. If you are interested in skipping the shipping, and you're going to the national tournament, you can also use the code NATSPICkup at checkout for anything that you're picking up from Your Turn Games. So anything on the website, you can use that code, get free shipping, and then you'll be able to pick it up from Andy at the national tournament in Wilmore, Kentucky, which, speaking of nationals, if you haven't pre-registered, you should do that. I know it's past the deadline for the name tags, but it's still very helpful for us to pre-register. So please do that as soon as possible so that we can make sure that we have all the planning and everything in place. If you want, there's more details that were just posted yesterday, so Wednesday, on the Discord for the Wednesday night activities. We've got the worship service going on, and then we have the elder address, which is something that hasn't been done at nationals before, and also the fantasy draft, which this will be the 3rd year in a row of that. That'll be taking place at the venue live on Wednesday night before we get into the official events on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So, all that said, let's go ahead and get into the game with Joe. We're going to be watching it at double speed, as we typically do when I'm doing commentary, just because it kind of cuts out some of the thinking time. Joe won the die roll here, and I believe he chose to go first. He's got a hopper and then also a harvest, so he made the harvest Lost Soul token there, little Baboony Tim token. They're always fun looking tokens. And then we also, I drew a prosperity, so I'm trying to decide what to discard in my hand here, which is tough. Going second, I feel pretty comfortable with where I'm at, with this hand. It definitely is not a go first hand, so I'm kind of glad that Joe chose to go first. But it is difficult to know what I'm going to need for a first turn block here. I don't really want to throw away my shipwreck this early, because I do like to have answers for a few of those offensive fortresses that he could have, especially because I know that Joe is playing Purple Warriors, and David's Stronghold is particularly good against Holy of Holies and all that to make his Warriors CBP. So because I knew the matchup, that actually influenced my decision there a little bit, and looking at a wall of protection on turn 1, which is another one that my shipwreck might be targeting here at some point, just because I like to choose the blocker stuff. But because I knew that Joe was playing purple, then I knew that Lying Prophet wasn't probably going to get me too many brigades or too much drawn, and so I decided to keep Saul of Tarsus over Lying Prophet, especially because Saul is also a prophet, so if I drew into a false piece, I could use that. Joe, unfortunately for him, I guess didn't have any great attacking options, so he mainly went first so that he could put Thomas into play, and because I had Christian Martyr, I decided to use that right away on Thomas in territory, because I knew that I was going to be doing a bunch of searching. So I used David's Harp to go get Temple Dedication, put down Pharaoh's Daughter to go get Moses, and then I played Temple Dedication to go get, I believe, a Holy of Holies, or no, no, I think I got a pot of mana here because I was worried about Judean mediums more so than uh, more so than Holy of Holies would anything Holy of Holies would stop, I guess. And so using then Moses to go and get a battle winner kind of set me up for having a protected Moses, and then Pot of Mana makes it so that he can't make whatever he has CBN, or like if he has a Prince of the Air or Prince of Greece, something like that. These are all things that I know because we had this matchup before, and so that was a little bit of gamesmanship there, so to speak, where I was able to kind of make a prediction based on our previous game and what I knew about Joe's deck. So Joe put down a Hellas. He equipped him with is that Adino's spear? Yeah. And was able to attack with Hellas to discard my Pot of Mana, which was unfortunate that he had the answer right away, and then my Holy of Holies wasn't there to prevent it. Hadn't gotten it set up there. And then I had Saul with a unsuccessful block that I was hoping to line up. I was thinking about also using Bound to the Law to just try to negate and discard Hellas so that I could get my Pot of Mana back, but he had an Angel of the Lord to take out Saul and use that to win the rescue there. So 1-1 after the first round, or I guess, well, partway through the first round because Joe did go first. So I was able to use Storehouse here to take the first sacrifice from my reserve. I figured if Joe didn't have great blocking options for Protected Moses last turn, then first sacrifice would be a good one to kind of help set up the my attack here. That take out whatever he would have drawn into that could help him. But I think maybe he didn't block because Moses was protected, not necessarily because he didn't have much defense. Because as you can see, I had 20 shekels here, and his hand was full of defense. So he did have a Judean mediums. He had a King of Tyrus, but because he knew that I searched for Faith Unbowed and then didn't have a way around it, it seemed that whatever his blocking options were for that turn were just not as good as he would have needed for getting around Protected Moses with an interrupt and withdraw battle winner. So yeah, with 20 shekels, I did have to put a character in play, which I forgot about until Joe reminded me there. I was mostly just wanting the hand information, but worked out well. I could put Malachite Slave into play, which I think was maybe not the right play because I had David's Harp in my artifact pile, so maybe putting his King of Tyrus or the Deceiver in play to set up for later might have been better. But Malachite Slave can be a nice one to have in play to choose the blocker with Daniel once you have Holy of Holies active to prevent, because he's probably not going to have enhancements to play on a Malachite Slave, and so getting to choose the blocker there is just kind of a free rescue. So I set that up, except now looking at my hand, I didn't really have options to get around a Malachite Slave this turn if he were to use it. So I used my first sacrifice there to underdeck his King of Tyrus, and then I attacked with Moses. And my thinking was that he had Judean mediums in hand, but he didn't have like he had the enabler essentially, but not the kind of payoff for another character to make Judean mediums effective, I guess, or to for Judean mediums to make CBN. So because of that, I was able to kind of force him to take the Goat with Horn block. He did do it. I mean, allowed to be trampled with Goat with Horn is very good, and in a lot of cases would have won him this battle, but because I had Philosophy, I was able to take that option out of his hand. And then I was still not quite winning the battle. It was a stalemate here, but I knew that he didn't have anything else to play, so really I just needed numbers, and I could get a little bit of value here by playing Delivered to go and activate a Holy of Holies. And that way I could stop him from using Hellas to pick off my other artifacts once I got that rolling. And that gave me enough numbers to win the battle against the Goat and put me up 2-1. And then because of the Harvest Lost Soul, Joe gave me another token there. And there's the experience credit on Moses. And I had also was still at 9 when I passed the turn and didn't realize that I didn't have a Land of Moab or something like that, or I just counted wrong. But so yeah, I just used Storehouse to put Offering Your Son into my reserve. Joe drew a Crowd's Lost Soul and then activated Great White Throne, banished the Goat with Horn to go grab an Abishai from his discard pile, or from his deck, and I was feeling good about having the Holy of Holies up and making that choice up until they played Crowd's Choice to go get David Stronghold. Fortunately for me, I had Shipwreck in hand and I had saved it. I was kind of going back and forth here on whether or not it was going to be better for me to use it on Wall of Protection so that I could get the choose the blocker rescues and kind of enable that. But I didn't have Daniel at this point, and if I let David Stronghold survive, then he just gets to attack with Hellas and take out another artifact. And so I'd played Shipwreck on David Stronghold, which I think was the right play here, and definitely shifted things in my favor a little bit here. I think that was for sure the right play, because then he just can't get as much value with his attacks as he would have otherwise. So that was a fairly significant moment, I guess, for the right time for me to have Shipwreck, and I think I got a little bit lucky there that I had it right away. But I also had to make sure that I didn't use it prematurely on that Wall of Protection when I certainly could have. So Joe attacks with the Hellas, gets a draw 1 from the weapon. The draw 1 on Hellas was negated, but he still gets the CBN enhancements. Fortunately, I had Naaman to also have CBN enhancements, and I was going back and forth here between Self-Destruction and Unsuccessful, but I figured that Unsuccessful might be more useful later on, and I can use the Self-Destruction while it's CBN to get rid of Hellas so that I don't have to risk him coming back and discarding more of my artifacts, since the deck is really built a lot around keeping those artifacts around. Then I had to make sure that I could stop him from interacting with them. So it just seemed like that was the right move, even though maybe I could have saved the Self-Destruction for another time where I needed an interrupt, or I had more heroes that I could take out with it. So yeah, Joe passed the turn. I had the Stricken star ability, which doesn't do as much unless I can deal with that Crowd's Lost Soul before going into battle. And I also drew a Hunter to go get my own Lost Souls to make some more tokens so that I don't get soul droughted here. And I'm thinking about Egypt, which it's actually kind of funny that I had Storehouse, Tabernacle, and Pharaoh's Daughter all right away. I was thinking about whether or not I actually wanted to play it, but I was like, all right, well, might as well get it out of my hand and go make sure that I didn't have any other targets for it. So yeah, interestingly, that was just kind of how it worked out, that I naturally drew all 3 of the targets in my 106 card deck, which is kind of funny. But then I could put my Humble into Egypt, and because you have the option to choose which Lost Soul you rescue in Type 2, sites can be a little bit more useful to protect the Lost Souls that you don't want rescued, which I guess is the same in Type 2 or in Type 1. If they don't have access, then you can hide them, but usually, you get to choose which Lost Soul they get in Type 1, so usually you can kind of just give them the less important ones anyway. In this case, I can keep my Humble a little bit more safe from his offense. So activate 20 shekels again here, bounce my Naaman to reduce the experience credit there, and I see his hand, and because I can tell that, because I wanted to look at his hand with 20 shekels, and then also because I want Stricken to be active during the battle, I played Son of God on the Crowd's Lost Soul, which, I was thinking that it was fairly fortunate, I guess, to have Shipwreck, Christian Martyr, and Son of God in my opening hand, and all three of them, within the first few rounds, got to have a big payoff, or have something that they were dealing with specifically that was giving me issues, and so that was fairly convenient. And Joe hasn't been able. I still have been able to, because of that, kind of keep Joe from gaining more resources. I wasn't able to do anything about his Christian Martyr there, though. I saw that in his hand when I looked at it with 20 shekels, and so I just decided to still attack with Moses and get the virgin birth out. I thought about attacking with Pharaoh's daughter and basically just making him use Christian Martyr on her instead so that I could keep Moses around. But actually, it worked out, because using Moses to search for virgin birth then allows me to keep Pharaoh's daughter around to use virgin birth on her, so that I can search my deck for another hero there. So go get like Elimelech or some other more value generating heroes out. I was kind of running out of targets for Moses anyway that were going to be useful. So Joe did find another copy of Hellas. He also has the Humble Lost Soul now, and so he was able to attack and discard my Holy of Holies. I blocked with Naaman and was trying to undo that, but Bound to the Law is New Testament, and so Naaman doesn't make it CBN. But I was hoping that my CBN stricken to negate his negate would have been enough to keep my Bound to the Law going. So yeah, I put him in special initiative. He had a negate with David's horses, or David's chariots, and then it was back to my initiative here. So I played stricken, negating David's chariots to put him back in special initiative using Bound to the Law, which again, it was kind of, it was really all to keep Holy of Holies active. Obviously, I could have been more efficient with my block if I had just played stricken right away and reserved Hellas, but I wanted to get my Holy of Holies, or keep my Holy of Holies around if I could. But unfortunately, Joe had another negate in his hand. I don't remember if I saw both of those when I looked at his hand last turn, or if he just drew them both, but I was a little surprised. I mean, he would have drawn one off of David's chariots, and then obviously his draw for turn. So it's easily possible, but I was just a little annoyed that I had to spend all three enhancements to get the block, and still didn't keep my Holy of Holies, but did still get the block, so we will take that. Going to my turn now. I'm using Storehouse here to take You Will Remain, and then I can put Golgotha down to go get Entrapping Pharisees, which is the only target. I could have grabbed the one from reserve, but at this point in the game, you kind of have to decide, like, at a certain point in the game, do you want to get more cards out of your deck, or do you want to be more efficient and grab the copy out of your reserve? At this point, I wasn't thinking I would necessarily need the one from reserve, and if I did, I had other options to get it out, and so I'd rather thin out the deck and take the Entrapping Pharisees out of there. I used Covenant with David as an artifact to go get my David, then I could use Virgin Birth to go get Elimelech, I believe. Yep. So that way I can get a little bit more value on Elimelech. Instead of just drawing one, I could draw two. Maybe, and also doing it that way means that I could activate David's Harp before battle on David and get an extra artifact activation there. So an Elimelech gets the draw two, get the banish, and I think I just go for another copy of Elimelech so that I can do the same thing next turn, since he got rid of Holy of Holies. So even though I didn't have Bethlehem, I wasn't too concerned about not having Elimelech, and then I was tired of him taking out my artifacts, so I decided to grab Glory of the Lord so that I could play that and then get my artifacts protected for when I got the second copy of Pot of Mana and Holy of Holies. And then I also wasn't quite sure here what I wanted to do for the attack, but since I drew into Boaz, I figured I would ban to another meek hero, so that way if he had Prince of Greece, then at least I would still be able to get there, or still have a hero in battle. I was kind of going back and forth because I kind of wanted David's Harp to be able to trigger so I could get on their draw or negate an evil card. But the main thing I was worried about was Judean Mediums to Prince of Greece. Prince of the Air I wasn't going to be able to stop either way, but also putting Boaz into play didn't give me any extra brigades, and so putting 2 heroes down means that Prince of the Air would have to target both of them, and instead of one of them and then 2 other things. So Joe made a great play here when Malachite Slave to Sisera, and he would have had initiative because I had 7 attack, but I kind of made a heads up move here, used my own Falling Away to convert Boaz, and then that left it in stalemate, and because Joe played the last card in battle, I was able to play I had initiative on David, because Cicero was making OT enhancements cannot be negated. Then my Royal Parade was able to go through, and he couldn't negate it, so I was able to bounce his Cicero and then get the rescue there, putting me up to 4. So I'm definitely in a pretty good position here. Running out of defense a little bit, but he did put down his Storehouse, which bodes well for my Trapping Pharisees. I think the downside is that he has an Abishai and I don't have a way to negate it, so he's going to be able to, or he would in theory, be able to band here, and I don't really have too many good options for that. I thought maybe I should have put my Entrapping Pharisees down so that I could play the Mayhem and reset my hand a little bit there. But I think, and especially because I played Golgotha and took Entrapping Pharisees with it, then he should, in theory at least, know that I have Entrapping Pharisees in my hand, but I think he may have forgotten, and that's a reasonable reason to keep characters like that in your hand, because if I had Entrapping Pharisees in my territory, he's probably going to read him before battle and then make sure that he has a way to play around it. In some cases, especially when you're playing online, it's your opponent is maybe more likely to forget things like that, and forget what cards you searched for. And so by keeping him in my hand, I was able to have the element of surprise here, and Joe actually decided not to band here. I think he wanted to have the CBN enhancements off of Hellas and hopefully get initiative to play them. And then also he took out my Covenant with David, which I think maybe, I don't know for sure, but maybe he didn't realize that my David's Harp was active on David over there. So he probably, I think his better option probably would have been to take out David's Harp. But, taking out Covenant with David makes sure that if he gets rid of David, that I don't have another option to go get another one. I'm only running 1 copy of David in this deck, but he doesn't necessarily know that. So, plus I have a Limelech though, so I don't know. Yeah, probably David's Harp would have been the better option there, but he may not have realized that that was an option. So, Entrapping Pharisees, able to get the block pretty easily there, just revealing the Tenants Kill the Sun in my hand to capture Hellas. And then because Joe had Storehouse, his hand was protected, and he wasn't able to instead the capture there. So basically, with the Storehouse, as long as that's active, then Entrapping Pharisees is going to be able to take care of any lone hero that he attacks with, which is part of what makes it really good, because it's also cannot be negated. So it works very well with Pot of Mana and Holy of Holies active. So that's why it's in the deck if you hadn't put that together yet. I did draw another copy of Holy of Holies on this turn, but because I, at this point, was hoping just to get more resources, I wanted to use another Elimelech, and I decided to leave Holy of Holies deactivated and just activate You Will Remain here to draw some more cards and then be able to go get Ruth, who was the best hero to grab with both copies of Shared Meal in my hand here. So Shared Meal could potentially get me a CBN rescue here, especially if he has characters like Sisera. I don't want to attack with anybody too big. So unfortunately for me, though, he had Judean Mediums to King of Tyrus. I was feeling decent about Prince of Greece because I had You Will Remain. Prince of the Air would have done the trick, but King of Tyrus also is going to do the trick here because I don't have any way to get through his CBN protection. So I let Ruth go there, and then Elimelech is the third copy of Elimelech I had drawn. So put him down, and I just had to put down one more card to get down to 8, and then pass the turn. Joe got his second copy of Distressed here, and which my deck doesn't really care too much about. That's one of the interesting things about this deck is that it actually it's built for counters like that. Distressed and Confusion of Mind. They're both counters that typically are pretty good, but this deck doesn't really care about because it's built to play around Holy of Holies, and it's part of what makes it strong. We can see Joe, he thought about taking Smashed Opponent, but instead took Valley of Salt there from his reserve with Storehouse, and then he played Son of God to take Wicked. I think he has a Buckler in his hand, which is something that I knew early on, or relatively early on, because he had asked, I think in one of the Hellas attacks when he played David's Chariots, he was wondering if Buckler would work at that point to protect Hellas, but because when weapons are played in battle, they're not equipped until after battle unless they are specifically equipped by an ability. So like for Abishai, he equips the weapon to himself, so that would work. But just playing it with initiative or special initiative does not actually equip the weapon to the character. Now he's got a whole army going on there. He's got David's Mighty Men coming together with all their weapons, and I don't have any artifacts active to be stopping him here, so he's going to be able to kind of do what his deck is built to do. He attacks with Abishai, searches for Snatch Spear, bans to David and Asahel, so that he can go get a Benaiah. Yep, and he's kind of setting up his future turns with this attack because Benaiah Snatch Spear is a quite powerful combo, especially against most decks. It's maybe a little less so against this one because I have a lot of CBN, CBP characters, but against a deck like his, you can, you could really do a lot of damage with that because you just, you don't draw our search and then you choose a Judean Mediums or you choose Malachite Slave. So as long as you're dealing with any of their CBP stuff, dealing with their Humble, all that jazz, then Benaiah Snatch Spear is going to be pretty strong. It's basically like attacking with Daniel with Holy of Holies up, except you're also negating enhancements. So now Joe is able to use Asahel to switch to Shammah, and then Elieser's Sword to negate my protect abilities, so he negates Storehouse. And then he can ban to Elieser to take out an evil enhancement from my hand. And he's able to take out one of my copies of Unsuccessful, which I've got 2 in the main deck and 1 in the reserve. So I've used the 1 in the main deck, the other one was now discarded, and then so all I have left is the 1 in my reserve. So I block here with Entrapping Pharisees still. I figure even if I can't get all of them, I can still just capture the one that's the most annoying or kind of the most enabling. So I capture Abishai, and that gets rid of the weapon as well, which is nice. I don't have to worry about the protection from shields because Colosseum is negating that. So even though Shammah and David are protected from the first evil enhancement, or actually just from all evil enhancements, right? Then I don't have to worry about that too much, but I think I have a different plan anyway, and now that he played the Buckler that I knew I had earlier, then my plan definitely had to switch. But I figured I would get some value while I just had initiative here. I didn't think that he had any other dominance that he was going to play. He already played Angel of the Lord, and after playing Buckler, he probably wasn't too concerned about playing Glory. I was, at a certain point, maybe he would have once I do some searching here with False Peace, but I figured I would take the opportunity since I didn't have any evil prophets to just use both copies of False Peace that I had sitting in my hand, one of them to my deck for Mask of Pride to just get some more value, generate some random resources, because there wasn't any like one particular thing that I could search for other than dominance, which I can't search for with false piece. So I decided to grab the Mask of Pride and then use the other false piece to grab the other copy of Unsuccessful, which I think was really my only option to win this battle here, to get this block. Since I drew into Famine in the Land, I decided to use that, even though Joe has Storehouse, so it's not really going to be affecting him. But it let me reset my David in a way that lets me reactivate David's Harp next turn. So I could have just saved Famine in the Land, played it on my turn to bounce my David. But for one, I mean, that takes up the territory class enhancement played for the turn. And then also, if you bounce David with David's Harp on him, then it doesn't let you reactivate David's Harp on him in the same turn. So if I want my David's Harp to be active when I attack, then I have to reset him before my turn. And so I was able to do that. So yeah, Joe got down to 8 because his hand was protected. So Famine in the Land, I'm 90% sure that that's how that works, that reducing the hand size doesn't go through protection. That could be wrong, though. It might function kind of more like a restrict, where it's, changing the rule, or like it's affecting the player, not targeting the hand. But I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Maybe I'll make a note of that somewhere on the screen here for you to see if I can confirm that before the video goes up. But that's the way that we played it anyway. So really, Famine in the Land was only hurting me here, and I didn't have any copies of Land of Moab out to increase my hand size. So now we're kind of cooking with gas. We got the full, well, not quite the full thing going, but we've got Holy of Holies active, You Will Remain, David's Harp on David. We still have the possibility for 2 more artifacts being active in this deck. I guess technically 3. We could have False Prophets and Damascus with Unsuccessful and Bound to the Law, and then the Cross on Golgotha. But I think right now 3 is doing the trick. The funny thing is that after bouncing David, I actually didn't want to search here. I decided not to search with Storehouse. I didn't want to convert David to search my deck for anything. I didn't search with David's Harp. And so I didn't want to trigger Judean Mediums. And by doing that, I was able to get him to make a less optimal block, where he had to just go with Prince and then try to underdeck 3 cards. He targeted Naaman, You Will Remain, and David, which gave me special initiative, so I was able to just play Shared Meal to abeyance and then reserve his Prince and pick up a Distressed Lost Soul. So it was kind of weird not drawing or searching with this deck before going into battle, but you got to do what you got to do to play around Judean Mediums if you don't have Pot of Mana active. So here I'm using Storehouse to reserve some of the good enhancements that I don't feel like I'm going to need quite as much. And then also I discarded Mayhem because I was getting to the point where, now I'm at 5. I have played Son of God already, but I have Crowd's Choice in hand, so I can go get Second Coming, and I've got Angel of the Lord in hand to hopefully get me 1 more rescue here. It is a little bit tricky, though, when he's got a Judean Mediums and King of Tyrus in his territory. So I very well might need 1 or more of those enhancements that I reserved in order to get through. He did find a Confusion of Mind, which I wasn't too concerned about. He played Shipwreck on Egypt. I think he wanted to be able to pick up my Humble, which makes sense. He wasn't able to use it on Tabernacle because it was protected, and Colosseum, his deck actually kind of likes Colosseum, so he doesn't really care about that. Storehouse, he maybe could have done, especially after I reserved a couple of good battle winners. It might have been worth it for him to do that just to limit my resources, but if he's lining up Benaiah with Snatch Spear, he kind of wants Humble to be off the table. And he makes what seems like a really strange play here. Benaiah choosing Naaman to block, who's got CBN enhancements, but he's got a Glory of the Lord. He had a plan with it. Unfortunately, I also had the right answer to it in Doubt that I was able to play and add to battle to make it a stalemate. And because he couldn't play enhancements, then that was going to get me the block. Fortunately, he did not have any other dominance to to play there to help him win the battle, because even though Doubt was trying to restrict dominance, it didn't. Well, actually, yeah, because I don't think my Humble was active, so I don't think Doubt was, or Doubt Humble was active, so Doubt would have worked through Benaya, but I had Holy of Holies active, so it was still being negated by my own card. So I drew a Prosperity there. I was able to just throw away one copy of Tenants Kill the Sun. I didn't think that I really needed both. I mean, it's definitely one of the best, if not the best, Evil Enhancement in my deck, but it's really good with Nicodemus, which I didn't have at the time, although I do have Deceiver there. So, but between Tenants Kill the Sun, Duplicity, and then also Self-Destruction and Orpa Departs with Naaman, and Mask of Pride as well, I wasn't feeling like I was necessarily needing that many evil enhancements, especially given the advantage I had now, or the Lost Soul, Redeemed Soul advantage that I had at this point. Really, I was focused more on how can I get better, how can I make sure that my attack will go through. Because I drew in a Second Coming, I was able to use Crowd's Choice here to search for my Bethlehem. And really at this point, because I knew I couldn't really get around Judean Mediums to Cave Tyrus, I was just going to try to get as many resources built up as I could to try to figure out a way around it more easily. And so I used Elimelech to draw, and then David to search. And I believe I just go get Daniel here, but, or no, okay, I guess I get Faith Unbowed. And then that way, maybe I have, oh yeah, because I need Faith Unbowed to actually have an answer to King of Tyrus for future turn, have an interrupt and withdraw option. So I think, oh, okay, yeah. Before I let him block, I actually just recognize that King of Tyrus blocks me here, and I kind of bank on him not having another answer by playing Angel of the Lord on King of Tyrus. So this way, Prince of Greece doesn't get me all the way because I've got Your Remain. I also have Awesome Things, or is it Ride On Victoriously, whichever one adds to battle. I think Ride On Victoriously. And because I search for Aminadab, then I would have that option to add to battle there. Prince of the Air would have been good, but he, I just reserved one last turn, so unless he had another copy in his hand, then probably wouldn't have access. But also, if he didn't underdeck Prince of the Air himself, then I would still have been able to use Ride On Victoriously in that situation, because Aminadab was in my hand. Fortunately, all I had was Prince of Greece, took out my David, and I was able to use You Remain to add Mordecai to battle, and then get a CBN Faith Unbowed to withdraw his evil characters, and that was it. He didn't have anything else after that, so I was able to pick up the last two and get to 7 here to win this game 7-2, which definitely feels... I think the game itself was a little bit lopsided. There were a couple of points where Joe was like, yeah, I don't think I can come back from this. Because, we were, throughout the game, just kind of considering it like practice for nationals. This is, I don't know how close Joe will, close to this deck, Joe will be for nationals, but he's usually pretty close this is generally what he likes to play are the Purple Warriors, and he's mixed up the defense quite a bit from what he's played in the past, but it's definitely a strong defense, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar to what he ends up with. But as I think he learned from last game and this game, that there are just a few tweaks that he wanted to make. One of the things that he added after the last game was Wall of Protection, just because the choose the blocker stuff, like his defense is built of a lot of different strong different components that when put together are very good, but if you're able to kind of be more surgical about it with like choose the blocker stuff, then you can kind of pick it apart more easily, especially in a deck like mine where I'm running Pot of Mana and Holy of Holies to make it so that whatever evil character I choose is just going to be even less impactful than it was, or than it otherwise would have been. So less likely to be able to get the block. So this deck is one that you would definitely have to watch out for, both in Type 1 and Type 2. It's I think it is still threatening in both categories. In Type 2, it's maybe a little bit slower to get set up, and I think that you have more time to find the right answers. But once it does get all set up, Glory of the Lord, Eliezer, Son of Aaron to make it CBN, Holy of Holies, and Pot of Mana, then it's a lot more difficult to recover or to come back from. And even if you do deal with a piece, and maybe you get a turn of being able to make the attack or the block that you want, you still have to then deal with the second copy, or the duplicates, the backups that a deck like this is going to be running. So I do think it's a strong Type 2 deck. It's a little bit slow. It is kind of hard to generate resources once you have the lockdown going, but that's kind of the point. It's supposed to be like that both for you and for your opponent, and then your deck is just a little bit better, better built for that, so that you can take advantage of it more so. Like, you can see that Joe had a decent portion of his offense set up here. Benaya plus Snatch Spears, still going to be able to work through Pot of Mana with Holy of Holies. And so in most cases, he doesn't necessarily care about that if he's got that set up. But his defense is going to definitely struggle against kind of the surgical aspect or attack of this offense, especially with Pot of Mana active when Judean Mediums gets shut off. So that is the game with Joe. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching some more Type 2 content. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I'll just go out and say it. I think it's the better category. It's more fun. I am excited to see where it goes next year with the format changes. Hopefully that will be more inviting to people or enticing to people to try it out, because you don't feel like you need 4 copies of any card, but really you don't anyway. Like this deck that I'm playing is actually very close to being legal under the new changes. I'm running the 3 copies of Elimelech, the 3 copies of Unsuccessful, and I think that's pretty much it, other than the Lost Souls. Like you'd have to go singleton for the Lost Souls, but I believe other than that you are more open. And then there are actually a few cards in here that you'd probably put a second copy in that you wouldn't get to under the current rules. So something like Golgotha, you probably wouldn't put a second copy in this deck, but for instance you could. So that's something to consider. A deck like this I think is going to be good for the seasons to come, and I'm excited to see where Type 2 ends up next year, but also, of course, I'm excited to see what happens this year. I think Type 2 at Nationals is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a pretty stacked field, which is not to discourage anyone from trying their hand at it, but it is pretty fun, and you might enjoy it more than Booster Draft, maybe. I don't know. Booster Draft was pretty fun too, but try Type 2 out at some point and see if you think you can swing it or want to just try it out one time at Nationals. We'll have a good time. All right. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you all later.